everybody. Thank you for coming for our annual parenting seminar. As a pediatric dentist, extreme parenting is something that I deal with on a daily basis. But fortunately for me, it's usually over in about a half hour. But for the rest of the time, for most of us, extreme parenting or parenting is something we deal with on a constant basis. Credit to everyone for coming out here on the day off to better ourselves with parenting and dealing with different situations that arise every day with our children. The question's brought down, why are we called the B'nai Yisrael? Why do we send our children to schools known as Beis Yaakov? Why don't we call ourselves the B'nai Avram, the B'nai Yitzchak? In next week's parasha, Yaakov gives his sons, the Shvatim, he gives them brachas. On the surface, it seems that Yaakov is a little bit harsh in some of the messages and some of the brachas that he's giving his children. He tells Reuven that he's impetuous. He tells Shimon and Levi that they're clay chamas. Why didn't he try to tell them, how great they were and how good they're going to be and what's going to come out of them? So on the surface, it seems harsh, but the truth is that every child needs to hear something different. And what Yaakov was telling his children was what they needed to hear. They had certain character traits that they were born with. And what Yaakov was telling them was that with these character traits of who they are, they could become great if they put this to the right use. And that's what we have to know when we deal with our children. Every child has to hear something different. Every child is different. Every child has their good character traits or their inbred traits, which we have to gear towards the right direction. JFS S.A.R.A.H. Is committed to helping people in the community here, in dealing with crisis and preventing crisis. And we do this on a daily basis without any charge to anybody who comes. We don't turn anyone away regardless of their finances. And we have events like this to give to the community, to help the community in dealing with their daily stress and trying to prevent any crisis from arising. We're actually having our first breakfast coming up in about a month and a half, and this is a chance for the community to try to help us continue our great work and our amazing dedication to the community. I just want to thank Michelle Welikoff, who really arranged all of this and spent the last couple of months arranging the seminars, putting together, arranging for everyone to have breakfast and arranging for the location and for us to be able to make this happen. I want to thank the following sponsors. Mr. and Mrs. Naftali Perlowitz, Mr. and Mrs. Eli Zolti, Mr. and Mrs. Ari Rosenwasser, Mr. and Mrs. Yossi Tau, Rabbi and Mrs. Sandy S.A.R.A.H, Mr. and Mrs. Aaron Foxbrunner, and Mr. and Mrs. Steve Bogachev, and the Rothenberg Law Firm, who helped make this event possible. Most of you are not here to see me speak, although maybe my wife is here to see me speak. Rabbi Krohn really needs no introduction. He's a prolific author. He's a mile for decades. He's passed this on to his children, who have also become miles. He's a prolific speaker who speaks across the world. And he, on a personal level, I go back many years with him. I spent Shabbos meals and Yontif meals by his house when I was in Yeshiva in Queens. I've actually learned the Chavrusa with one of his children. And my family has gone on trips with him across the world. I've seen him speak in Florida, New York, all over the place. And it's my pleasure to introduce Rabbi Pesach.
Many of you may have noticed that there's a podium behind me, or there was. I like to speak so that we can make a connection. When I go to an auditorium, there's 1,000 people, and they shut all the lights, I tell them to put all the lights on. I'm not a performer, we're connecting. It's going to be a conversation on the most important conversation that we can possibly have, which is our children and grandchildren, and how to relate as parents and grandparents and B'nai Hashem great-grandparents. And that's why I was thrilled that Rabbi Moshe Lukens called me. I thank him, I thank Mr. Rickles, I thank all those that were involved, and hopefully we'll be able to be inspired together. A number of years ago, I went out of town to give a drasha on chinuch, as I'm about to give today. And I told all the people that were there certain things, that if they did these things and followed these ideas, that hopefully their children would be fine. And I got a letter a few weeks later, a very, very respectful, but a very, very painful letter. And the letter said pretty much as follows. Rabbi Krohn, how did you dare come to our community and talk the way you did? You know, you said that if we did all these things, our children would be fine. My husband and I, we have 5 children. 4 are wonderful, and 1 is Gehenna on this earth. 1 is so off the derech and gives us so much tzoros. And we treated all the children the same. We did all these things that you said we should do. And we treated all the kids the same. And look what happened. It doesn't always work that way. And I never write back when I get a letter. I always call. Because when you write something, whether it's an email or a regular letter, sometimes what you write can be misunderstood. But if you call, you take the time to call to the person, you can hear the body language even on the telephone, and you can express yourself and understand where they're coming from. And what I thought to myself at first was that this lady obviously doesn't know the famous pasuk, what does that mean, you treated all your children the same? That's the worst mistake that any parent can make. As Rabbi Peikes just mentioned, you have to treat every child has to hear different things. So what do you mean you treated every child the same? But of course I didn't say that to her. I just said that I'm really very sorry. I should have said that hopefully these things would work out, and of course there's no guarantees. But I thought to myself that really she made a terrible mistake by treating all kids the same. There are some bright kids that can get 100 on every test, and he can have a brother that can only get a 70. And if they both get 80 on the test, one child has to be talked to, how come he didn't fulfill his potential, and the other one should be complimented because they fulfilled more than their potential. And I left it at that. Of course, I didn't make her feel bad, and I apologized, and that was that. Now, I do a lot of driving every week, almost 500-600 miles a week, between speaking and doing brisson, so I'm always in the car. And that's when I do a lot of my thinking and trying to come up with ideas. And then one day, as I was driving, something occurred to me. You know, how did it happen that Avraham Avinu, who certainly knew more about chinuch than we'll ever know, how did he have a son like Ishmael? How did Yitzchak, who certainly knew more about chinuch than we'll ever know, have a son like Esau? And how in the world did David HaMelech have 3 sons, Avshalom, Adoniyahu, and Amnon, that were such Rishayim? 2 out of those 3 wanted to kill him. David HaMelech certainly knew more than we'll ever know. And you know what I realized? That lady was right. There's no guarantees. You could have, and we all know, families, Rosh Hashivas, Rabbanim, that have children that are at risk, and the parents are tearing their hair out. And they did everything. And what that lady really meant was not that she treated all the children the same. She surely treated every child according to what that child needed. And yet it wasn't successful. And that's the first thing that we have to know today. That no matter what we talk about, and we're going to talk about practical examples of various aspects of chinuch, the first thing is you need mazel and you have to daven. Because it could happen anywhere. The greatest people can have children that nebach are off the derech, and like this lady said, are Gehenna on this earth. And then you have the craziest parents who are the most wonderful children. How in the world does that happen? Sometimes my wife, who's a teacher, you know, meets people at PTA. You're the parent of that child? Like something's wrong someplace, right? So there's no guarantees, right? We all know that. We all know that for the kids down the block, right? But the idea is that we've come to discuss what we can do logically and make sense emotionally, but without feeling nothing happens. And without mazel, nothing happens. So we just have to daven every day that Hashem gives us the koyach and gives us the wherewithal to say the right words to the children, to be able to inspire them so that they reach their potential. So I want to share with you something very interesting that I think is a very, very important first step in chinuch. As Dr. Peikes mentioned, I've had the great schus to travel literally all over the world with hundreds, if not thousands, of people already since 2003. Every year we take 100 different people to different places. His grandmother was on a trip. It's unbelievable. I will never forget. She had more koyach than some of the teenagers that were on the trip. I don't know where she got that kayak from, but she was all over the place. It was amazing. And so we've gone to Poland, then we've gone to Lithuania, and to Frankfurt, and Prague, and Vienna, and Morocco, and Spain, and Italy, and all these glorious places where Yiddishkeit flourished. But I will never forget the first trip. The first trip, we went to Vilna, and from Vilna we traveled north. I mean, even to say that I went to Vilna is something that was unimaginable 15 years ago. Vilna is like a different world. I mean, who could ever imagine going to a place where the Vilna Goyim davened and walked, and you go to the cave of Reb Chaim Oizer, the Zayda of Klal Yisrael. It's like unbelievable. But then when you go a little bit more north of Lithuania, you go to Ponevezh, to the town of Ponevezh. I will never forget, we're riding on the bus, right? And I'm waiting to see the Ponevezh Rav, and all the yeshiva boys in the street. Then there's a big green sign, the Ponevezh Marathon. Like that kind of put me in my place. Ponevezh has a marathon that's like a Lakewood Marathon, right? You don't expect a Lakewood Marathon, right? Or a Mir Marathon, right? But of course, Ponevezh was a place where the Ponevezh Rav was the Rosh Yeshiva. And while we were standing outside the building that unfortunately is now, there's Rabbi Peikes, right? You were with us, right? And while we were standing outside the Ponevezh building, which today is a bakery, and of course everybody's trying to be funny on the bus, and they say, of course the yeshiva became a bakery because every yeshiva needs dough. Fine, no. But anyway, but the idea is, but somebody pointed out that the building still has 12 windows. That's amazing, because if you look in the Mishnah Berurah, really when a shul is built, there's a Kabbalah that it should be 12 windows. And the Mishnah Berurah says that there's a soid, there's a secret. Now, to me, it would seem that it's got to be more than just the idea of the 12 Shvatim, but I think that that's one of the reasons, because just like Hashem answers the tefillahs of all the Shvatim, so that's why there are 12 windows in a shul, and that bakery does have 12 windows. I remember a fellow, Avram Yitzchak Rubin, was on the trip and he pointed it out. But while we were standing outside on that front lawn, I told the people something that the Ponevezh Rav once said, which is so brilliant, which is such a basis of what chinuch is all about. And he asked this question. It says in Tilim Kuf Mem Daled Pasuk Zayin. David HaMelech is asking Hashem, Shalach Yodecha Mimorim, Hashem, please send your hand from above. Pitzeni v'hatzileni mimayim rabim. Save me from the stormy waters, miyad b'nei necha. From the Goyim. The Goyish hands, the Goyish nations, they are like water. Stormy waters. So the Ponevezh Rav asked, David HaMelech is comparing the Gentile nations to water. Yet the pasuk in Evadia says, "V'hoya beis Yaakov Eish, or beis Yosef Lahava." Yaakov is considered a fire. Yosef is considered a flame. So what happens when water and fire touch? They come together. The water puts out the fire eventually. So is that what's going to happen to all the Jews? That the goyim that are considered water are going to put out the fire? Is that what's in store for Klal Yisrael? It's a great question. But listen to the answer, which is even greater than the question. And the Ponevezh Rav said something ingenious. He said, when does water put out the fire? When they touch each other. But what if you have a pot? You have a mechitza. Oh, you have a mechitza, you have a separation. And the water, the fire is on the bottom and the water is in the pot. The fire can get so hot that all the water will dissipate. All the water will be gone. And he said, that's exactly the first lesson of chinuch. That our homes have to be a mechitza. Of course we see Goyish philosophy and Goyish advertisements and Goyish technology, and we have it, but if we bring it into the house without a mechitza, the walls of our home have to be a mechitza, the walls of our Beis Medrash, the walls of our boys' schools and girls' schools have to be a mechitza to the outside world. That when somebody walks into your house, walk into your house later. I haven't been in most of your homes, so you know that which I'm saying is not meant personally. Walk into your house as if you're walking in like an outsider. Would anybody know without saying anything that an Orthodox Jew lives here? Where are the S.A.R.A.H? Are the S.A.R.A.H tucked away in the basement so that nobody sees them? Or are they in the living room or in the dining room? What do you have on the wall? What pictures do you, I always say you can tell a family by what's doing on the refrigerator, not inside the refrigerator. That's a different problem. I'm talking outside the refrigerator. What's doing out? Go watch, look what's on the outside of your your refrigerator, you will be amazed. Is it a Met schedule? Rahman al-Islam, because they're going to lose anyway. What's the difference? Right? Or is it a spirit chart? Or is it candle lighting? Or is it a report card, pictures of grandchildren? Or is it some other secular stuff? And you'll see that which is on your refrigerator is a reflection of what your house is all about. What pictures are on the wall? I'm a big believer in sports. I believe every kid should be involved in sports. I don't think there's anything wrong in following sports. I think it's a great conversation piece. When kids follow the Yankees or the Mets or whatever, the Giants, the Jets or whatever, and the parents can talk to them about it, it's fabulous. But chas v'shalom, not to hang Kobe Bryant on your wall. I'll tell you where you should hang. Well, LeBron James, all these guys, they don't hang on your wall. There's a difference. What is hanging on your wall is a lesson by osmosis to what's chashuv in your mind. Is Yerushalayim hanging? Are tzaddikim hanging? Or is it all kinds of other secular things that are hanging? And when the children walk into the house, or when you walk into the house today, take a look. Where, like I said, where are the S.A.R.A.H? What's the ambiance? What's the feeling that you get from the house? Is it a connection to the outside world? Or are the walls of your home a mechitza? That's the first lesson. That we give a message to our children by the walls of the home, by the walls of the school, by the walls of the Beis Medrash. And that's what I think the first thing is all about. The second thing I believe is that every home has to be a place of happiness. I'll tell you a very fascinating Gemara. The Gemara is in Tainis Chav Beis Amud Aleph. The Gemara tells us Eliyahu Hanavi was once walking with Rav Breika. And Eliyahu Hanavi says to Rav Breika, you see those two guys there? They are going straight to the Olam HaEmes. They're going straight to Olam Haba. And Rav Breika was surprised. Who are these guys? He didn't know they're such big Talmidei Chachamim. So after Eliyahu Hanavi left, Rav Breika goes over to these two guys and he says, who are you guys? I hear you're so special. Listen to what they said, and we're going to watch how the Ma'amoyes picks up an extra phrase that they used. But listen to what they said. They said to Rav Breika, Inchi b'dichi anan, we are happy people, mebatchinon atzivi. We make those that are ba'atzis, those that are depressed, we make them happy. Imagine, if you have the capacity to make somebody feel special, you have the capacity to make somebody feel loved and validated, you got a straight ticket to the Olam HaEmes. That's what they said. Mebatchinan, we make happy those that are sad. Not everybody has the capacity. And I once heard a beautiful word. I have it underlined in my siddur. You must underline it. I'm a big believer in underlining in your siddur. Any shot that you hear in the siddur, underline it every day when you say it. You'll think about it. In the Hallelujahs, we say, Haroifei l'shvurei leiv. Haroifei l'shvurei leiv. Hashem is the one who heals the brokenhearted. Think for a moment. What are the first three letters of those words? The first letters of each of those words. Haroifei l'shvurei leiv. Hey, lamed, lamed, hallel. That's the biggest praise you can say on anybody. That they have the capacity. Haroifei l'shvurei leiv. So now, Rav Breika is telling them, we make people like, well, watch what the Ma'am Loye says. The Ma'am Loye, if you want to look it up, is in Dvarim Kaf Chesman Zayin, and he says like this. What did they say? They didn't just say that we make other people happy. They said, Inchi b'dichi anan, we are happy people. We make others happy. Why did they say we're happy people? That's not what he asked. He asked, how are you going to Olam Haba? So listen what he writes. V'zeh she'amru, that which they said, Onu samechem, we are happy, u'masamchem acherim, we make others happy, comes to teach us. She'modam roitze l'sameach acherim. If you want to make your spouse happy, you want to make your kids happy, you want to make your co-workers happy, you have to learn how to be happy. If they would be depressed people, even if they wanted to make somebody else happy, they couldn't do it. You want to have a happy home, it's not about them, it's about you. You have to learn how to be happy. You have to look at the positive. You have to be the one that builds people, builds yourself, and looks at life in a positive light. And when you look at life in a positive way, then you'll be able to make others happy. That's why they said, Inchi b'dichi anan, we are happy people. No husband should ever tell his wife, as Dr. Rabbi Herman said before, oh, you know, that woman in the other house, she's always dressed so nice. And the wife should say to the husband, oh, you know, you don't have a parnasa. Look, they have an SUV. You know, they can go on vacation. And with your salary, we can't do that. Nobody wants a nag. Nobody wants to be compared to anybody else. You have to be happy. You have to learn how to be happy with what you have. And then you can make your children happy. You can make your spouse happy. And that's exactly what they were talking about. I once saw a great expression. A smile is a small curve that sets a lot of things straight. A smile is a small curve that sets a lot of things straight. When somebody smiles, you want to be in their presence. Somebody's always looking down. Who wants to be in that person's presence? There's a great story about Rabbi Salanta. He saw a guy in Elul. The guy was walking in the street, he was looking so down. So Rabbi Salanta said, what happened? He said, Rebbe, it's Elul, I'm doing tshuva. So Rabbi Salanta said, because you're doing tshuva, I gotta suffer. Right? If you look like the world's falling apart, nobody wants to be in your Dalit Amos. It's not a reason to look down. All of you who know me personally know that my Rebbe is Rabbi Krohn Dec. So I learn with him every single week, Baruch Hashem, for many, many years already. So we talk about everything and anything. But he's not a marriage counselor, and many people call him, you know, just to get some advice, but basically he'll talk to them and then he'll send them, you know, for professional help. So I remember one time I was learning with him and he looked down and said, Rabbi, is everything okay? He said, listen, I think I poskin wrong. Like, it was unbelievable. I said, Rabbi, what does that mean? You never told me that. What do you mean you poskin wrong? He said, last night a couple came, and the guy was such a depressive person, and they were having marriage problems. So I poskin for him that when he comes home, he's got to tell his wife a joke. That's the first thing he's got to do. I said, what's wrong with that sock? He said, because after I spoke to him for a while, I should have told him to tell 3 jokes, because the first 2 wouldn't be funny. So when you come home, you know, the first thing has to be something that's positive. Something that's positive. Now, a husband comes home from a whole day of work, he should say he's getting fired tomorrow, even if he is. You know, he could say that he had a good shot today, or he made a good business deal, or he heard something nice in Eretz Yisrael. Or the wife, you know, again, even if the kids are hanging from the ceiling and, you know, the principal called 3 times, you should say, you know, I heard good news, somebody got engaged. Or I made your favorite chocolate cake. Or my mother called, she decided not to come. You know, something that's going to bring a smile to his face, right? Something positive. You know, if you don't mind my quoting a secular source, there's a wonderful book, What Children Learn from Their Parents' Marriage, by Judah Siegel. Children are deeply affected by the ways in which parents demonstrate respect for each other. When parents praise or compliment each other, they send a message of value that is fully absorbed by the child. When parents demean each other, they create discomfort and conflict in the child. Disrespect between parents creates an imprint of marriage as an unsafe place to be. We know today, Rahman al-Islam, there are so many divorces. But what's incredible is that there are divorces even before they're married for a year and a half. How in the world? What is going on? They're married for a short time. They're married for a very short time. They're only married for a year and a half, and already they're getting divorced. What in the world could have happened? Now, if Chas v'Shalom there was a medical problem and they didn't tell in advance, I'm not talking about that. That's absolutely unforgivable that they didn't tell the truth, but that's a different story. But sometimes regular couples, what happened? So I asked my dear friend, who's a therapist, that's not why he's my friend, but he happens to be my friend anyway, his name is Yaakov Solomon, and he told me something fabulous. He said, you know what happened? That probably these kids come from a home where they saw strife. And what happens is, all of a sudden, the young man opens up his mouth to his wife and starts criticizing her. And she thinks, oh no, I'm not going through what my mother went through. My mother didn't end the marriage, but she lived through Gehenna for so many years. My father never stopped. In shul, we all know people like that. And shul is so wonderful. I remember I'm in Denver. I married a girl from Denver, Colorado. So it was very difficult dating, obviously, because she was so far away. And how you going to find an apartment, right? She was never in New York. So we rented an apartment in a basement someplace. And, you know, I figured after 6 months, you know, then we'll find a regular place where to live. So we lived downstairs. Please don't try to find out where we lived. We lived downstairs from a guy in our shul who, I didn't know he knows how to talk. In shul, he was so quiet. When he had an aliyah, that's when I heard his voice. But then, when I lived downstairs from him, such yelling and screaming. Upstairs, I couldn't believe this was the same person. And we all know people like that. When it comes in the workforce, on the shul, they're so nice. That comes at home, Hashem Yerachem. It's terrible. And the kids see that. And of course, one of the kids got divorced. I think both of them got divorced. Because they saw stripes. So what happens? A young couple sees, oy vey. And let's say the woman starts nagging him, and she starts comparing him to everybody else. And he thinks, oh no, this is my mother all over again. I'm getting out of here before it's too late. So you want to make sure that your children have a good marriage. You have to set a tone of happiness and a positive attitude in the home. That's the greatest lesson that children see as far as a marriage is concerned. Because children are affected by the marriage of their parents. And here's something from Stephen Covey. 7 Habits of Highly Effective Families. Listen to this. The greatest thing you can do for your children is love your spouse. The strength of this binding in the marriage creates a sense of security in the entire family. The quality of that relationship truly governs the quality of family life. You've got to have a happy home. It's got to be. That's the most important thing that we can learn today. Try to find a way of making your home a happy place, because if not, it's not only that your life will be miserable, your children's life is going to be miserable as well. Because then they realize, oh my gosh, marriage is not necessarily a safe place to be. And so that's what the Gemara is saying. They were happy people, these 2 people that Rabbi Krohn saw. We are happy people. We're able to make others who are depressed and make them happy. I once saw a great expression. The right temperature in a home is maintained by warm hearts, not hot heads. The right temperature in a home is maintained by warm hearts, not hot heads. Now, I just want to say something so that I'm not misunderstood. I believe that parents can argue and should argue and have differences of opinion in front of the children. Not to make believe the parents never have a difference. Question is, well, do we spend money on this thing or not? Do we really need this thing? So I'm a big spender, and my wife, you know, doesn't spend a nickel. So there are discussions, of course. You know, I think we should have this in the house. And she thinks, no, it's not really necessary. That's okay. You can agree to disagree. That's a very important expression. You agree to disagree. Or where you want to go on vacation. There's different types of vacations, and you sit around the table and you could discuss it. Sometimes the children will add to the conversation, sometimes not. The father wants to go one place, the mother, but the kids see, hey, wait a second, there's a conversation, there's a disagreement. They're not yelling, you're so stupid, you want to spend money on that. Oh, you're an idiot, you're so cheap. Oh, that's the meaning, that's terrible. That's the beginning of the end. That's the beginning of the end, chas v'shalom. But to disagree, of course you could disagree. Nobody could agree. That's the pshat ezer kenegdoi. That's exactly what the Torah is telling you. What does it mean? Ezer kenegdoi. Hashem made that Chava would be an ezer, a helpmate, kenegdoi, alongside. But kenegdoi means opposite. It's a dream. It doesn't happen that you agree on everything. Nobody wants a yes man or yes woman. I mean, you know, we all want it, but it just doesn't happen, right? but it just doesn't happen that way. And we have to show our children that there are differences. And that's normal. But it has to be a respectful difference. I remember one time I went to Rav Volba. You should all try to get his sefer, both in Hebrew and in English. And again, it's in Hebrew, Zriya Obinyan Bechinuch. If you want to know if I know how to raise kids, look at that guy right there. How you doing, Eliezer? My son. I'd kiss him in public, but he'd be embarrassed.
Already embarrassed.
You're already embarrassed. I remember I once went to Rav Volba, and he has a wonderful sefer. It's called Zriya Obinyan Bechinuch. And it's called Planting and Building, Raising the Jewish Child. Get it. It's worth its weight in gold. It's a thin little book. Every parent should have it. And I remember I went to him with one of my children and we were talking, and I said to him, you know, I have the opportunity to speak to many parents. What should I tell them about chinuch? And he said something incredible. He said, tell every parent there are two things they have to give their child: time and love. So my other son, not Eliezer Avram, was there, and he was learning in the kollel in Eretz Yisrael, and I guess he was frightened how much time is he going to have to give all his children, because all of a sudden you have to give time and love. So he said to Rav Volva, how much time do I have to give my children? And on the spot, Rav Volva gave the classic answer. He asked him, how much time do you have to give the children? The answer was, as much as they need. And that's the answer. You cannot go out every single night to a shir and to do chesed and to do everything for Klal Yisrael. People ask me, how do you travel? One week you're in Mexico, then you're in Switzerland, and then you're in Chile, and then you're in Passaic. Every night you're out. You know what the answer is? My kids are married. You gotta be crazy to do this if your kids are still home. You've got to be home with them. You got to tell them a story at night. You got to go to, when they go to sleep or when they're playing, or you got to be there for supper. You've got to be there for the meals. No commission, no share, nothing is worth it. Because if you don't validate them, somebody else is going to validate them. Somebody else is going to make them feel special, not the type of people you're looking for. It's only once the kids are married, then you could go dancing all over the world. Of course, you got to be involved in Tzarkat Tzibah, as we'll talk in a few minutes. But the point is, time is so important. You know what I used to do with all my kids? And it's so funny. This past Shabbos had the greatest Shabbos of my life. I'm not going to go into all of it, except to tell you that we were all together, children and grandchildren. And one of the children, I think maybe it was even Eliezer who mentioned it. One of the things, I think you mentioned it, the hour, right? Oh, somebody else, one of the other kids. Okay, it's all right. Every child, every week, had a half hour to an hour of undivided attention. No cell phones, no calls, nobody could interrupt that. You want to go bowling? We'll go bowling. You want to go pizza? Pizza. You want to learn Ezra? We'll learn Ezra. No difference. Every child wanted to do a different thing. But every child knew that they had me for undivided attention, and that's what you got to do with your kids. Every single one of them. And then they feel, oh, listen, Tati loves me, he's spending time with me. Nobody in the world can interrupt. No one. No one. When was the last time, you don't have to raise your hand, when was the last time you had a real conversation with your child? Not, well, what'd you get in school? You forgot your sweater, you forgot your lunch, I'll see you tonight, you know, don't get killed with a bike, don't drive in the street. It's not a conversation. That's a control freak. Right? No kid wants to have a mother or a father who's a control freak, giving them orders from the time they wake up until they go to sleep. Sit down. I want to say something to the fathers, and then I'll say to the mothers. If you don't know the name of your child's Rebbe, every single one of your children, if you don't know the child's Rebbe's name and what they're learning, then you got homework to do. And to the women, if you don't know the names of your daughter's 3 best friends and their favorite color, then you've got homework to do. What else is more important than your child's friends? That's where all the influence is, not from the teachers, from the friends. And if you're too busy because, you know, you're helping Klal Yisrael, it's not going to work. You can help, as we'll talk later. But the most important thing is time. Time with your children. I have, again, a dear friend who's a therapist. His name is Dr. Mayo Wickler. Told me such a painful story. Unbelievable. He told me that he had this 22-year-old girl who had certain problems. She was in the office, and they were talking. And now this was the 3rd session that he was with her. And he tells me, every time he tells me the story, he says, I still do not know what possessed me to say this thing to her. And I regretted it the second it came out of my mouth, he says. He said, I said to her, you know, this is the 3rd time that you're in my office. You haven't mentioned once anything about your father. You want to tell me something about your father? The second he said it, he knew it was terrible. Because she burst into tears, uncontrollable crying. He said, I'm so sorry I brought it up. I shouldn't have brought it up. If you wanted to talk about it, you would have said, please, please forgive me. And she's crying and crying, and she's holding up her hand. No, no. She says she wants to say something. He said, listen, you don't have to talk about him if you don't want to. No, she said, I want to tell you something. She said, I remember many years ago, with my early teens, it was the first night of Yom Tov, Pesach. We were sitting at the Seder, and I took the Afikoman. At the end of the Seder, my father comes over to me. He says, I know you took the Afikoman. What do you want for the Afikoman? And I said to him, a conversation. Is there anything more painful than that? That's all she wanted, a conversation. That's terrible. That's terrible. The kids don't want money all the time. They don't want gifts all the time. They want you. You know what the problem really is? The problem really is that we don't think that we're chashuv. I remember the first couple of years that I got married, when we first started having children, I'd look at my wife in the middle of the night and said, come on, this is a joke. She's a mother, I'm a father. You know, like we're playing a game. My father, he was a father. My mother, she was a mother. What is this? But you know something? Your kids, they look at you as that mother that you saw your mother as. Or that father that you saw your father. And to them, we are the whole world. But we don't look at that that way because we're honestly humble. Because we feel that we can accomplish much more, we can be much more. But to the children, you're everything. They want us. They want us to spend time with them. They want us to love them. And that's what we have to do. That's the priority. If a person is benched with children, that's the biggest blessing in the world. There's no greater blessing in the world. But the Abishai gives us an opportunity, and we have to make the most of that opportunity. And that's with time and love. I'll never forget, never. Again, Mayor Wickler told a story, so sad. He said there was a couple that had a divorce, never. And the way they worked it out was that the little boy, 8-year-old boy, he was with the mother a whole week. On Shabbos, he was with the father. That's how they worked it out. So one Tuesday night, she's putting him to sleep, and he starts crying. She says, what's wrong? I want to be by my daddy. What do you mean you want to be by your daddy? You're by your daddy on Shabbos? No, I want to be by my daddy tonight. And she can't control his crying. So she calls her ex. He's not far away. He said, listen, he wants to be by you tonight. Do you mind coming to pick him up? He says, no, it's no problem. He'll come. He comes to pick him up. He takes the boy, and he's about to put him to sleep. And the little boy starts crying. He says, what's the matter? I want to be by my mommy. What do you mean you want to be by your mommy? You just said you want to be by me, right? That's why I came to pick you up. Oh, I want to be by my mommy. So now, if she couldn't control him, he surely couldn't control him, right? He calls her back. He wants to come back. Can I bring him back? All of a sudden, they're so friendly, by the way. But anyway, okay, fine. So he brings him back. As he's about to leave, the little kid stands by and goes, Daddy! Daddy, don't go! I want you to stay here tonight. He says, I can't stay here tonight. Daddy, please, I want you to stay here tonight. He can't. And he leaves, and the little boy cries himself to sleep. And the next morning, the mother calls Dr. Wickler. She tells him the whole story. And then at the end, she says, Dr. Wickler, do you think my child needs therapy? You know what Dr. Wickler said? Your child doesn't need therapy. He needs parents. So I want to say something that I never would have dreamed to say 10 years ago. We know many couples that are divorced. And they could be wonderful people. Unfortunately, the marriage didn't work out. But no father has a right to criticize the mother in front of the child because every child's entitled to a mother. And no mother has a right to criticize the father in front of the child because every child is entitled to have a father. Just because the two of them can't get along is not a reason the child should suffer. Every child needs a father. Every child needs a mother. And if a divorce unfortunately had to happen, and it does happen, this Shabbos I'm going to a place called, a fabulous organization called Sister to Sister. You know how many divorced women there are with teenage kids that will be there this Shabbos alone? 700! 700 divorced women with children. And then they have upstairs, they're going to have another 80 women for Achoseinu, not Sister to Sister. Those already, they raised their children already. So, but a child is entitled to parents. If for whatever reason the marriages are not working out, then that's a tragedy in itself. But a child is entitled to a father, a child to a mother. And today, grandparents are so young that they can step in sometime. Especially today, with finances so difficult, fathers and mothers have to have 2 or 3 jobs. Grandparents are so young today. 2 winters ago, my wife went ice skating. Sometimes, you know, I'm sure it happens with my son. I come into a house, you take a look, you don't know who the grandmother is, you don't know who the mother is. I mean, it's great if you call the grandmother the mother, but heaven help you if you call the mother the grandmother. That's bad news. That's terrible. So call everybody the mother, you're on safe grounds. But today, I'll tell you a story that happened with my grandson. Today he's already 18, 19 years old, Baruch Hashem, Avram Zeller. I remember when he was 8 years old, I called him, I said, Avram, listen. As I told you before, I'm a big believer in sports. I said, Avram, when you're ready for your first glove, call me. It's on me. We're going to go buy it together. He said, okay, Zaidi, I'll call you. 2 days later, Zaidi, I'm ready. All of a sudden he became ready. Fine. So we go to a place in Queens called Sports Authority. I'm sure you have them all over the place. It's without exaggeration 10 times as big as this space Medrash. So many balls and bats and footballs and basketballs. It's unbelievable. And not only that, they have gloves today for infielders and outfielders and catchers and first basemen. So, how are you gonna, and then for 8-year-olds and 9-year-olds, how are you going to choose, right? So, now I know the women cannot relate to this, what I'm about to tell you, but I remember my first baseball glove. It was a Wilson glove. The smell of that Wilson glove was heaven itself. Between pitches, I used to, like a drug addict, I just smelled the glove. It was, you remember the Wilson glove? Mama's Tom gonna eat it. It's unbelievable. So we're walking up and down the aisle, all of a sudden I see a Wilson glove. I can't believe it, they're still making gloves. I pick it up and I smell it. It's the same smell. I said, Avram, this is your glove. He said, Zaidi, how do you know? I said, smell it. You'll see. There's no what I'm talking about. Okay, I pick up a ball, we throw it back and forth. Okay, it's Amish. He catches everyone. I said, this is your ball, this is your glove. We're going home. 3 weeks later, one night, my wife comes home with the glove. She says, Avram said you could have the glove tonight. I said, what does that mean? He says, nah, he knows you like to smell it. You could have it. Now that happens when you spend time with your child or grandchild. Not that you give them $35 and say, go buy a glove. That's not what they want. They want you to go with them. So every time he uses the glove, he's thinking of a Zaidi. And today, every single Friday, he's learning along, but he never misses a time that he doesn't call me to say good Shabbos. How did that happen? It didn't happen because he's 18. It happened because of what happened when he was 8. That you start such a connection with time. That's the biggest investment in the world, is family. And when you invest time in your children and grandchildren, it pays dividends. Because that's really what you have. Friends change, people move to different neighborhoods, but the family remains forever. And that's why time is so important, and love is so important. There's another aspect. I'll never forget this. Never forget this. I remember once we were at a good convention, Rav Shmuel Kamenetsky, probably one of the most seichotika people that Klal Yisrael has. If you ever have a problem on anything, call Rav Shmuel if you can get through to him. Just such a brilliant, logical, normal person. He once said in Birchas HaMazon, Harachman hu yivarech avi moiri v'yas'imi marasi. Hashem, the compassionate one, bless my father, my teacher, my mother, my teacher. Avi moiri? Rav Shmuel asked, not every father's a Rebbe in the yeshiva. Not every mother's a Mora. What does it mean, avi moiri? Imi marasi. And Rav Shmuel said, every father is a role model. Every mother is a role model. How do they spend their leisure time? You think the kids don't know the difference? They see whether a father learns at night or whether he's spending his whole life on the internet. They see how a mother talks about a shidduch. They're not going to say anything. But if the mother kills a shidduch, so then what do you think they're going to do when they get older? Daughters are so exactly like their mothers, it's frightening. In my house, all the newspapers are on top of the refrigerator. Why? All the doorknobs have rubber bands. Why? Because that's what my mother-in-law did in Denver. So of course, where else do newspapers belong if not on top of the refrigerator? And where do you keep rubber bands? Not in your desk, on the doorknobs of every room in the house, right? Because that's what my mother-in-law did. So a mother, sometimes when you pick up the phone, and you pick up the phone and somebody answers in the other house, you think it's the father. It's really the teenage son. Because even the inflection of saying hello is the exact same way. It's not that they really sound the same, but they pick up all the nuances. So you're a role model. So one of my favorite stories ever. I love traveling, as I told you before. One of my favorite places is in Antwerp, in Belgium. The most wonderful Yidden there. So there's a guy there, you've got to meet him if you go. His name is Pinchas Kornfeld, an electrifying Jew, a Moshe Shera in Hasidic Gar, if you knew who Moshe Shera was. Just unbelievable. He's involved in the government, and he's involved in Ger, and he's a Shtreimel Yid, but he's just an incredible Yid. So he told me this great story that in Antwerp, in the pre-1A, so the boys and girls are together, they all speak Yiddish. So there was a Mora there that was teaching the children about the Shabbos table. So she said to them on a Sunday or a Monday, listen, on Wednesday, we're going to have a Shabbos table, and Chaimel, you bring in the wine, and S.A.R.A.H, you bring in the challah, and this one will bring in the cutlery, as they call it, the silverware, and the other one will bring in the tablecloths or whatever. Fine. Wednesday, she sets up the table. It's mamish, looks like a Shabbos table. She says, Chaimel, du bist ein Tati. You'll be the father. Oh, he's so happy. He's sitting up front, right? All the boys and girls are sitting around the table. And she says, okay, Chaimel, fang on, begin. He plops back on the chair and he says in Yiddish, oh, you will get a schwere Woche. Oh, did I have a difficult week. That's how you start Shabbos. You can't even make that up. That's how you start Shabbos. She can't make Yiddish. Say Shalom Aleichem. Right? Because that's what he hears his father say every Friday night. Why you had such a difficult week? Because every parent is a role model, whether they realize it or not. That's what it's all about. That's a Rachman Yivarach Avi Meiri. So everything you do, how you speak to your spouse, how you speak about the teachers, how you speak about the Rav, that's what the child is going to learn from. That's the greatest chinuch, being a role model. I'll tell you an unbelievable story. Unbelievable. I remember it was year 2000, and I want to tell you why Dafka. I remember that it was 2000. I was traveling to Eretz Yisrael. Some of the kids were still learning in Eretz Yisrael. We went there for Sukkot. So I met Shlomo Jacobowitz. Now, Shlomo Jacobowitz, he should live with me well. He was a wonderful, wonderful person. He just retired. He was the principal of a whole network, Eitz Chaim schools in Toronto. He must have, I don't know, 1,000 kids in all these schools, the Eitz Chaim schools. And his brother was Lord Emmanuel Jacobowitz, who also I had the schools to know. So anytime I see children, one after the other, that are special, I always ask these children, tell me about your parents. I mean, as we said before, there are crazy parents that can have a good kid, right? But crazy parents don't have 10 good kids. It doesn't happen that way. They have one, lucky. But if one after the other is special, there had to be somebody very special up there. Listen to this. So I said to them, tell me about your father. Tell me about your mother. I still remember we're standing in the plane, and he says to me, I want to tell you a story that happened in 1938. Now, so this is the year 2000. It's 62 years, and he's still talking about it. He said it was a few weeks before Kristallnacht. We all remember that Kristallnacht happened in November. So this was October. October was Sukkot, right before Sukkot. He said we had to build a sukkah. Everybody was afraid to build a sukkah. We all had porches that faced the front, and everybody was afraid to build a sukkah because the SS guards, they were going up and down the streets already, and if they saw a sukkah, they would knock it down, take the people to jail, take away their jobs. Who knows what they would do? But my father, Rabbi Yoya, he said he went out to the porch and he measured. There was a retaining wall so that nobody would fall over. And he measured the wall and he remembered the first Mishnah and Sukkah. Now, when all of us learned the first Mishnah and Sukkah, you try to think, why in the world are Chazal teaching this? How is this ever going to happen? Why do you have to know it? What's the halacha? The first halacha in Sukkah, that the lowest Sukkah, the smallest Sukkah you could make, is 10 tefachim, 40 inches. Who's making a 40-inch Sukkah? Kids? No. He measured the wall and saw it's 44 inches. Listen to what he does. It's unbelievable. They were on the 3rd floor. He sent me a picture of it years later. It's 44 inches, let's say this high, right from the wall. He built a sukkah, 10 tefachim, which is 40 inches. On top of that, they put schach. So now when you're looking up at the 3rd floor, you can't see anything. Because the sukkah with the schach is only 42 inches, and the wall was 44. He said we did not miss one meal, a whole sukkah. We all sat on pillows, we sat on the floor, only the boys and my father went in. There was no room, obviously, for the women. We didn't sing Zmiris, nobody should hear us. But we didn't miss one meal. Oh, when you have a father like that, who's moisen nefesh for a mitzvah, and does it with seichel, and does it with mesiras nefesh, what do you think the kids are going to be like? Of course, they're going to be extraordinary, like Shlomo Jacobowitz and his son Emmanuel Jacobowitz. I have a friend, his name is Zevi Trink. Now, I don't know his children, but I guarantee you that his children are extraordinary. He's one of the principals in Darkei Torah. So I once heard that he has so many guests on Shabbos. He once told me, he said, if you're ever in Flatbush for Shabbos, come and eat a meal by us. You'll see what goes on. He must have, without exaggeration, 25 to 30 people. He goes to every shul, every homeless person that he can find, he brings to the meal. So I once heard that he once went into a store and he wanted to buy a ring coat. So the guy asked him what size. He said, I need all sizes. He said, what does that mean? He said, I have so many people that come to me for Shabbos meals, and sometimes it starts raining. So some are tall, some are short, some are fat, some are skinny. I need all sizes. So he probably bought about 20 raincoats. So I called his wife. I said, Mrs. Trank, tell me, is that story really true? She says, I don't know, but I'll tell you this, we're out of size 42. So what do you think his kids are going to be like? What do you think the kids' houses are going to be like? If the father has such an open heart that he's going around collecting all homeless Jews. He doesn't do it Friday night. Friday night is for the kids himself. But Shabbos lunch, that's for everybody. That's a great role model. Rabbi Chaim Volozhiner writes something very interesting. Actually, his son Rabbi Yitzchak writes it in the Nefesh HaChaim, in the Hakdama. He says, my father used to give me musar when he saw she'eneni mishtatef b'tzara da'achrino, when he saw that I don't get involved in the problems of other people. This is what he always used to say to me, the next 3 words, write them down, put it on your refrigerator, put it on a bumper sticker, put it in every school. Listen to these 3 words. It's the essence of what a Yid is all about. Loi la'atzmai nivra. You are not created for yourself. That's what Rabbi Chaim Volozhiner used to tell his son Rabbi Yitzchak. You are not created for yourself. Every one of us in this base medrash has talent. Hashem didn't give you the talent you should become rich and famous. Hashem gave you the talent. You should use it as a service for Klal Yisrael. I know I'm going to embarrass this fellow right now, but I really don't care because his father is so great and so special. And that's Rabbi Gross, who's sitting right here. You know I was going to talk about your father. He has a father, Jack Gross, who's the living essence of what it means, Loy la'atzmai nivra. I can't go in to tell you everything that man has done, but I just was with him in a parlor meeting. We just went to Poland together. Him, Jack, and his wife, they live for Klal Yisrael. They live for Klal Yisrael. Parlor meetings on Ashir. Organizations in Eretz Yisrael on Ashir. Helping people who had different challenges without stuff. Sometimes, bring your father here for sure, and let him speak to the island of what he's involved with, if he'll allow himself to be, coerced to talk in public. Loi la'atzmai nivra. You have to show your child that you're a part of Klal Yisrael. Can't go out every night, as we said, unless the kids are all married. But you got to be involved in the shul. Got to be involved in the Beis Yaakov. Got to be involved in the schools. Got to be involved in Tomchei Shabbos. Your kids have to know that you're a cog in the wheel that's called Klal Yisrael. That you do something for other people. You're not only living for yourself. Loi la'atzmai nivra. And it doesn't always have to be for money. It could be for free, pro bono, or whatever it's called. And the idea is that you give to others. And you have to tell your children. I know this is a little embarrassing to talk about, but I always told my children this because I know that they're going to do this when they're able to. And probably some of them do, they just haven't told me yet. In our neighborhood, we have a grocer. His name is Mr. Rosenbaum. It's a whole family business. They have a box. Now it's a computer, but they had a box where people owed them money. In that silver box were bills for over $120,000. How in the world do you run a grocery store like that? But that's how they run it. And you know what people in the neighborhood do? And I've done it many times, and I tell my kids, not because I want to show off about it, because I want to teach them that's part of chinuch. To me, one of the saddest things is when somebody comes to me Menachem Mobile, and the Avelim are sitting there, and people are telling them stories about their parents that they never heard. That's criminal. Why didn't the parents tell the kids? They should have told them all the good things that they're doing. So like this, they'll know to do these good things. They have to wait until they die to find it out. You don't have to go broadcast it. But the kids should know what the parents are doing, what they're all about. So many times I go into the grocery store and I say, here, listen, here's $100, put it on somebody's bill. And Rosamund will always say the same thing, I'm not God. You got to tell me which family. I'm not going to choose. So before Yom Tov, you know, if somebody has an $800 bill, they'll never know the difference. Now that it's $700, they owe so much money. But why not? If you could afford money before Yom Tov and you could make Yom Tov b'ravchus, show the kids, let them know, what do you get money for? What do you make money for? To help other people. And that's matan b'seis on the ultimate level, because they'll never know that you gave it. That's a beautiful thing. And finally, one more thing, and we'll review and end with a great story. One more thing is do mitzvahs b'simcha. Ivdu es Hashem b'simcha. Serve Hashem with happiness. Boyu lefanav b'ranona. What are the first letters of the words boyu lefanav b'ranona? Believe. Do things with your whole heart. You're buying an Esher, you're buying a lulav, you're building a sukkah, you should be excited about it. You're coming to shul, you're going to a shir, be excited about it. And when you're excited about a mitzvah, not that you're complaining about it, that the matzah's so expensive, it's lechamoini because it makes me poor, right? That's not what you want to tell your kids. I just heard a great story. Shlomo David, my son-in-law, just told it to me. He went, no, not Shlomo David, Avram Zelik, my other son. He was just in Lakewood, and he met Rav Shlomo Feibel Schuster. So Rav Shlomo Feibel told him something so incredible. We all know the story how Rav Moshe Feinstein always used to talk about those people who came in the early 1900s and they lost the job every Friday because of Shmir Shabbos, and they said, "Oh, Yid," and then the kids fell away. So there was somebody that just had a 100th birthday. He lived in the beginning of the 1900s, and at the Suda, somebody asked him, was it hard to be a Yid in the early 1900s? Listen to what he answered. This is the first time I'm telling you this in public. He said it was hard to make a parnasa. Isn't that delicious? It wasn't hard to be a Yid. It was hard to make parnasa. What a difference! What a difference! Why do you think he has children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren that are from? Because it wasn't a question of not being a Yid. It was hard to make parnasa, true. He got fired 20 times. Not that it was hard to be a Yid. The other people said, "Oh, it's so hard to be a Yid." So of course, the kids saw it's hard to be a Yid, so they moved out. But that's the attitude. Doing a mitzvah b'simcha. I'll tell you one story about doing a mitzvah b'simcha, and then we'll review and end with a great thought, maybe. Okay? Maybe we'll skip the review. You'll listen to the tape. I think people are taping it. There was this guy, Michal Goodfarb. Never missed a minyan, never. Have a son-in-law, not a grandson-in-law like that. I don't know how many years didn't he miss a minyan. The first time he missed a minyan, I think in 13 years, was the night after he got married, or the morning after he got married. And he even asked the Shaila, if he's allowed to miss the minyan. And they said, yeah, you're chassan, you can miss the minyan. But, so this guy, Michal Goodfarb in Eretz Yisrael, one night he comes home 3 o'clock in the morning, and he realizes, oh my gosh, I didn't have married with a minyan. Where are you going to get a minyan 3 o'clock in the morning? So if you're in Flatbush, you go to Landau's, right? And if you're in Borough Park, you go to Shem Shabbos. And if you're in Bnei Brak, you go to Rehov Rabbi Akiva, to Itzkut. What are you doing in Yerushalayim? So somebody told him in Zichron Moshe, there's a place where they have minyanim day and night. He comes at 3 o'clock in the morning. There's only 1 or 2 people there. He says, goes around from room to room. You think we're going to have a minyan? The guy says, what, are you crazy? A minyan? In an hour's basikin. We're going to daven shafars. He said, but I got to have a minyan. He says, I don't know what you're going to do. Listen what the guy thinks of. We wouldn't think of it in 40 years. He calls a cab company. He says, send me 8 cab drivers. Oh, send me 8 taxis. Only Israeli drivers. He says, only Israeli drivers? Who has 8 cabs, 3 o'clock in the morning? How many you got? 5. He calls another one. Send me 3 cabs, only Israeli drivers. They come there. 8 cabs come, 3:30 in the morning. One of the wisdom, chasana, wisdom, mitzvah. What in the world are we doing here? He says, I haven't missed a minyan in years. I'm going to pay every single one of you on the meter. Start your meters, like start your engines, and then after 500, and we're going to have a minyan. So some guys were from, they knew what Myra was. Other guys, you had to give them kippot. It took, like 25 minutes to go through Myra. At the end, he goes over to the first guy. He says, how much do I owe you? He was a from guy. The guy says, listen, sir, I've been davening all my life. Never did I see for a Tuesday night a guy is going to spend so much money for one ma'ariv. I wouldn't take a penny from you. So he goes to the guy, he had to give him a kippah. He says, how much do I owe you? The guy says, listen, sir, I haven't been in a synagogue in 7 years. I don't even go Yom Kippur. And tonight you forced me to come here. I should give you money. Not you should give me money. Not one guy took money from him. Not one of those 8. Why? Because they saw what it means to love a mitzvah. That's what it's all about. So let's review very, very quickly. And we'll end with this great story. Let's remember there's no guarantees. As we said, you have to daven. A person needs mazel. That's for sure. Let's remember, Jirov told us, your walls, not when the water touches the fire, that's when it's going to put it out. But if there's a mechitza in between, that's when the fire of Yiddishkeit can have a kiyum. Let's remember that your home should be a happy place. And if you're happy, you'll be able to make other people happy. Let's remember to spend time and love with our children. Give every child undivided attention every week, 20 minutes, a half hour, whatever, but the child knows that it's their time. Let's remember that you're a role model, whether you know it or not. Having children is not only a privilege, but it's a responsibility. And let's remember what Reb Chaim Volozhin told us, Loila atzmoi nivra, you're not created for yourself, we're all a cog in the wheel of Klal Yisrael. And finally, let's remember to do mitzvahs b'simcha. I just want to end with this beautiful story. This story was told to me a few different times once I first heard it from the Rebbe who was involved. There was a family. I remember when we went to Vilna the first time, and we stood outside the Vilna ghetto, and I told the people this story, that at the end of the war, people came back to Vilna, all the shuls were ransacked, there was only one shul left, and there were no Sifrei Torah. And they used to daven there every Shabbos, but they couldn't have Kriyas HaTorah. And then it came Simchas Torah. And the question was, how are you going to dance on Simchas Torah without a Torah? And the fellow who was there, he was a 15-year-old, told me, I mean, obviously he told me when he was an old man already. He said, we were looking around, and all of a sudden a young couple came in from the back. Nobody ever saw them before. And they were carrying 2 children, and he told me that the little girl who was 2 years old, her vocal cords were not even developed because they had been in hiding. And the men said, every child is a living Sefer Torah. Let's hold the children and we'll dance around the bima. And that's exactly what they did. They held the children and they danced with the children. And when I told over this story, Rav Shmuel Kamenetsky told me something so interesting, because I said to him, you know, isn't it amazing? Every Sefer Torah needs mazel. The Gemara says, the Medrash, the Zohar says, Afilu Sefer Torah Shebeheichol needs mazel. You go into a shul, there's 20 Sifrei Torah. So one you use on Shabbos, one Rosh Chodesh, one on Yom Tov. But 17 out of 20 you don't touch. Those Sifrei Torah have no mazel. So if every child is a Levitic Sefer Torah, the child needs mazel as well. So Rabbi Yohan Kamenetsky told me, you know what mazel stands for? You'll never forget this. Mem, Zayin, Lamed. Mokaim, Zman, and Lashon. If you're in the right place, at the right time, and you say the right thing, that's mazel. Mokaim, Zman, Lashon. And that's the bracha I give all of us together. Our children are Levitic Sifrei Torah. We have to have mazel. Mokaim, we should be there for them. Zman, we should spend quality time with them. And more than anything else, Lashon, we should be zeicher to say the right things to them, to inspire them. So they should continue the legacy of Klal Yisrael. Hashem should bless each and every one of us with children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And we should be zeicher to give over these messages, but no, there's no guarantees. We have to daven, we have to have mazel. And if we daven for each other, this neighborhood is one of the greatest in Klal Yisrael. I always say, when Eliezer got married, and he was coming back from Eretz Yisrael, I wanted him to live someplace else. And he said, no, Tom, I believe there's a future in Passaic. And he was right and I was wrong. Because this neighborhood is great. You have great Rabbanim, you have great Balabatim, you have great people here. It's wonderful. So you really have the opportunity to raise children on the highest level. And it's my bracha to all of you that you should be successful, and that next year we'll be able to do the JFS. We'll do it in Yerushalayim or HaKodesh. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi Krohn. There will be a minyan for Mincha next door. And if everybody could please fill out an evaluation on their way out, and also you can pick up information about the upcoming breakfast and help us out. Thanks a lot.